All right, we're going to go back on the record. We are here on Tuesday, January 17, 2023. The matter is Mark D. Jensen, 2002 CF 314. Let's have the appearances, please.
Good morning, Your Honor. The state of Wisconsin appears by Special Prosecutor Robert Jamboys, Deputy District Attorney Carly McNeil, and Public Service Special Prosecutor Beverly Jamboys.
Attorneys Bridget Krause, Jeremy Perry, and Mackenzie Renner appear on behalf of Mr. Mark Jensen, who appears in person. Good morning, Judge.
Good morning. All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, thank you for coming back. It's a beautiful sight to see all 16 of you again back here. Just one comment, and obviously the attorneys want to put in their case the way they think they should. I think it would be beneficial for the court and the jury if we don't have a lot of videos in the afternoon. I think everybody, if I asked for a raise of hands, I think I would get 16 votes. That's just a statement.
We only have short videos left.
Beautiful.
There's 48 minutes left of Brian Cosman, but after that, all the video testimony is very short.
That's good news. Okay, we're going to continue then. I believe Ms. McNeil, it is Exhibit 15, and we're going to start it, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So at this point in the video, there are two question and answers that do not appear in the audio. So by agreements, I am reading those into the record. This is still the testimony of Officer Cosman.
Is that correct from the defense? Yes? Yes? All right, go ahead, Ms. McNeil.
So the question to Officer Cosman was, quote, Officer Cosman, your department produced in this case the records relating to prior complaints regarding the Jensen home, correct? End quote. Officer Cosman's answer was, quote, I'm sorry, end quote. The following question was, quote, your department produced records relating to prior complaints, police complaints at the Jensen home, right? End quote. Officer Cosman's answer was, quote, yes. End quote. And now the video will resume.
All right, so that's part of the testimony. With that, we can start the video again.
I'm sorry, for some reason the sound is not playing through the TV.
evidence. Let me give you the numbers.
Okay, so then the sound appeared to be working. Sorry, was that plugged back in? Is that what happened?
No, she didn't plug it back in.
Okay. Well, I think the sound came back on, so. Back on, so I will now resume where we left off.
Next, I have with Mr. Jensen.
With Mr. Jensen?
Mr. Jensen.
To show you Defendant's Exhibit 198. Do you recognize that as a Pleasant Prairie Police Department contact report?
Yes, correct.
A contact history report, correct?
Yes.
And that records official business that was recorded between the Jensen home and the Pleasant Prairie Police Department up to the time of Julie Jensen's death, correct?
Correct.
Let me, I'm going to leave 199 with you and I'll come back to those. And that's a list of that's the contact history report. That's Defendant's Exhibit, 198, is that right?
That is correct, 198.
And we begin with November 30th, 1990, and that's an animal complaint.
That's correct.
Do you have any idea what that was about?
No, I do not.
Then we have
Before the state is displaying the exhibit that is being testified to, which is 198.
Thank you.
And now resuming the video.
on April 6th, 1991, a false alarm. Would it be your understanding that that would relate to some sort of like false burglary alarm or something like that?
That's what I would assume, yes.
On August 13th, 1991, we have the first report of harassment, correct?
Correct.
And Mrs. Jensen reported that she believed that that was committed by her former lover, Perry Tarica. True?
It may have. I'm not familiar with that call.
Okay. You would not have been handling a call in 1991, correct?
That's correct.
You are aware from reviewing your department's reports, however, that in January of 1992, Mr. Tarica was cited for harassment, correct?
Yes, I do.
And that was a case investigated by Officer Hunter, who I think is now Lieutenant Hunter.
That is correct.
And is it your understanding that that was January 1992, that Mr. Tarica was cited for harassment?
I believe it was.
Now, Exhibit 199 that you have in front of you is a series of incident reports that are clipped together. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And beginning with this incident on January 27th, 1992, that incident that was investigated by Officer Hunter, correct?
Sergeant Mark Hunter, that's correct.
And that simply indicates that there was a request about suspicious activity, correct?
It just says suspicious of it.
Pardon?
So I believe at this point that Exhibit 199 is being displayed. So I will display that. And now resuming the video.
The offense code is suspicious of it.
Well, if you look at, I'm asking you to take a look at 199, which has the incident report.
Yes, ask 121, which would be Sergeant Hunter's badge number, requests this incident for suspicious activity.
Okay. And there's nothing else that you know about that January 27th, 1992 contact?
No, there is none.
The next report relates to January 29th, 1992, correct?
That's correct.
And just 2 days later, and all that report says is complainant requests to see responding officer about a suspicious problem, true?
That's correct.
January 30, the Jensens contact, January 30, 1992, someone in the Jensen household had another contact with the Pleasant Prairie Police Department, correct?
That is correct.
And the subject of that contact was that the department was contacted to be told that the Jensens would be gone for the weekend, January 31st until February 2nd, and that Lori Coster would have the key to the home, correct?
That is correct.
So there wasn't any incident reported. They just wanted to let the police department know that they would be out of town.
Yes, we do vacation home checks.
Then February 20th, 1992, that's another report that the Jensens were going to be on vacation for a couple days, correct?
That's correct.
The next contact by Julie Jensen was on June 16th, 1992.
That's correct.
And on that date, Julie Jensen reported that a vehicle had been parked across the street from her residence for over a month and had not been moved, correct?
That's correct.
And it appears from the first page of that report that that vehicle may have belonged to a Melvin Ashley, correct?
That is correct.
And are you aware of the Ashleys living across the street from the Jensens?
No, I'm not.
You don't know anyone named Ashley?
No.
The next contact is May 8th, 1993. And what was reported on that day is that the complainants, the Jensens, state they believe someone is entering their residence and moving items, correct?
Correct.
Do you know anything further about that incident on May 8th, 1993?
No, I do not.
Do you know whether any fingerprints were taken at that time?
I don't know.
And also on that,
So I'm going to pause again and display for the jury that exhibit 198. And now resuming the video.
there's a request for extra patrol that would appear to relate to the suspicious activity about the items moved in the house, correct?
That would be correct.
Do you know whether items were actually moved in the house?
No, I do not.
The next contact on November 4th, 1993, that's your first contact with Julie Jensen, is that right?
That is correct.
And all that was reported at that time was that there were some annoying phone calls, hang-ups, and harassment, correct?
That is correct.
On October 21st, 1994, Julie Jensen called because two black males were selling magazines in her neighborhood. Is that right?
That's correct.
And then the next incident on October 22nd, 1994, Julie Jensen again called the Pleasant Prairie Police Department because there were two black males in her neighborhood selling magazines, correct?
That is correct.
And that was investigated and they were told that they needed to obtain a permit, correct?
That is correct.
On December 25th, 1994, Julie Jensen called requesting extra patrol because her Christmas lights had been damaged.
That is correct.
I take it that it's not unusual that kids vandalize Christmas decorations in Pleasant Prairie? Or
Unfortunately, it's not. It seems to be a problem all over.
On January 19th, 1995, there was a request for extra patrol. Is that right?
Yes.
And the report doesn't contain any information concerning what that was all about, correct?
No, it does not.
It does not even indicate who the investigating officer there was, correct?
That is correct. This has basically for all shifts.
Just 2 days later, on January 21st, there was a complaint about a trespass to land, correct?
That's correct.
And it looks like a Christopher Martin was cited for trespass to land, correct?
That is correct.
Do you recall what that was about?
No, I do not. I know Sergeant Becker investigated it.
All right, I just received a report. Let me show it to you.
And I believe I wrote a short supplement on it, but I'm not 100% positive.
Oh, it's trespassing. 21st, 1995. Let me show you Exhibit 200, Officer Cosman. And if you could just go to the second page, that fax cover page, isn't really necessary. And is it correct that the January 21st contact relates to a young man who is driving recklessly over people's lawns and knocking down mailboxes and that kind of thing?
That's correct.
So that was the January 21st trespass to land.
Right. And basically what happened in this particular complaint and why my name is on it, Julie Jensen had contacted me the following day. At which point I didn't know anything about this particular report. I went back and researched it on the report and contacted her and basically told her that she was not singled out. It was not damage done just to theirs, that it was a neighborhood, that several other residences in the neighborhood had also experienced some vandalism. So it was not specifically targeted toward them.
Okay. And was that was that the case with the Christmas lights and the parked car and the black males selling magazines? Those didn't appear to be specific context related to the Jensens, right?
Which ones?
The Christmas lights, the black males selling magazines, and the car parked across the street.
Well, those were reported by her.
Right.
That's correct. But as basically it was just to her of a suspicious nature.
Okay. I mean, just those other incidents didn't appear to be targeted at the Jensens for harassment.
Definitely not.
Then we have an incident on May 27th, 1995, boat road. There's two of them there. Harassment and extra patrol. We don't have any information. There's no report concerning what happened that day.
I don't believe so.
Then we move to August 25th, 1995. And there is a report that you wrote regarding activities of that date, correct?
That is correct.
On direct examination, you were shown a photograph, correct? By the prosecution, a pornographic photograph.
Yes, it was.
That relates to this August 24th, 1995 report, correct?
The August 25th, yes.
August 24th? Just to be clear, I think it's August 24th.
Oh, I'm sorry, it is 24th.
Oh, well,
I have written on the 24th.
okay. So there's a little bit of discrepancy between the face sheet and the narrative report that you wrote.
Well, I think what happened here is because there was actually a lapse of a couple of days when this occurred and when I was called.
Okay. And you first received a telephone call from Julie Jensen on August 24th, correct?
Correct.
And what she reported on that date is that she and her husband left their home together at about 7:30 on August 23rd, 1995, correct?
That's correct.
And she said that when they returned home together 45 minutes later, the garage door was open, right?
Correct.
And she was positive that the door had been closed when they both left together, correct?
Correct.
And at this time, she stated that they had been receiving some recent harassing telephone calls, correct?
Correct.
On this occasion, the Jensens turned over several photocopies of pornographic pictures that they had found inside the boat, right?
Yes.
And the photograph that had been found on July 3rd, 1995 in Mr. Jensen's truck, correct?
Correct.
And that was on that, it's on Kodak paper, correct?
The one is correct.
I'm sorry,
Which would be the state exhibit.
Exhibit 197, correct?
Correct.
That appears to be a developed photograph
It appears to be.
as opposed to being clipped from a magazine or being downloaded or printed from a computer or anything else. It looks like it's a developed photograph.
Correct.
That photograph, no one would mistake the woman in that photograph for Julie Jensen, right?
No.
And there was no claim that that was Julie Jensen in that photograph.
In
by
that,
anyone.
in that photograph, no.
You indicated on direct examination, Officer Cosman, that that was the only photograph that had been received that wasn't a photocopy?
That is correct.
Well, do you recall an instance in which Mrs. Jensen called you because some photographs had been left that she was confident depicted her?
That's correct.
There were photographs that depicted her engaged in oral sex?
They were not pictures of her, but she felt that they were of her.
She reported to you that somebody had left photographs of her engaging in oral sex, correct?
Engaged in having sex.
Oh, it was sexual intercourse, not oral sex.
I believe so, yes.
Weren't those photographs?
They were the same as all the other in black and white and appeared to have been photocopied.
Now, when you say they were the same, you mean they were the same
Same black
picture
and
or
white,
just the same type?
same type.
Julie Jensen called you and she said, "This is a picture of me engaged in sexual intercourse," right?
She said she had photographs of that. That is correct.
Did she show you those photographs?
She had them sealed in an envelope.
Did she show you them?
No, she did not.
You never saw those
I
photographs?
did see them. I advised her. She was very embarrassed about handing the pictures over. And when I got back to the department, I opened up the envelope and I looked at the pictures and determined it was not Julie Jensen engaging in any kind of sex, that they appeared to be pornographic pictures of the same content in black and white being on regular paper.
When you say regular paper, you mean?
Well, meaning
Regular
like
this.
correct, not something you would see on a back of a developed film as in the state exhibit.
So Julie Jensen asked you not to look at these photographs, is that right?
I advised her that I would have to look at them and see if it was indeed her that was in the photographs.
Let me back up and make sure I have this straight. Julie Jensen called you on the phone, first of all, right?
Correct.
Did she tell you what she wanted when she talked to you on the phone?
She asked me if I could stop by and pick up some pictures that she had, apparently of her engaged in having sexual intercourse, and wanted to turn them over to us.
When was this?
I don't recall the exact date.
Is there any report regarding this incident?
No, there is not.
When you responded to her telephone call, she told you that the photographs were of her engaged in sexual intercourse, correct?
As she believed were correct.
She said that she had looked at these photographs and she thought they were her, right?
I don't recall if she said she had looked at them or not.
Was
I
there-
would assume that she had looked at them, but when she handed them to me, they were in a sealed envelope.
And she gave you the sealed envelope and her initial instructions were, "I don't want you to look at these," correct?
Well, I advised her, she asked me if I had to look at them. She did not request that I not look at them.
Didn't you just tell me that she requested that you not look at them, Officer Cosmo?
If I did, I'm sorry. I mistakenly said that because she basically wanted to know actually if they were of her or not. She thought they were. She was embarrassed by the whole situation.
Do you know why it is that Julie Jensen could not determine whether it was a photograph of herself engaged in sexual intercourse and that she'd have to ask you?
I can't offer you an explanation on that.
And at least initially, she was trying to give it to you in a sealed envelope so you wouldn't look at them, so you wouldn't be able to confirm it, right?
Well, I think I don't know what her logic would have been for first basically what she told me is they were photographs given to her by Mark. Now, whether she had viewed them or not, I'm not 100% sure. I'm not 100% sure if she actually put them in the envelope or they were given to her that way and she did not look at them.
Well, she told you that she thought they were her, right?
Yes, she did.
And she told you, it wasn't as though Mark told her that he had made those, right?
Correct.
She didn't believe that they were photos of her having sex with her husband, right?
Right.
She believed that they were her having sex with her former lover, right?
With someone.
Did she tell you that she had more than one affair?
She told me of just the one affair.
And that was with Perry Tarika, correct?
That is correct.
You did not look at these photographs with Mrs. Jensen?
No, I did not. She asked that I not look at them in her presence. She was very embarrassed over her.
Well, after you looked at them and concluded that they were not her, didn't you go back to her and show her and say, these aren't you?
I called her on the phone. I did not go back.
How is it you determined that it was not her when she herself thought that it was her depicted in the photos?
Because the very first picture that I saw depicted a man on top of a woman engaged in sex. Both basically from the middle of the back up to the head of the male were visible. His arms were straight, like on the bed, and a woman was underneath him looking directly up. So there would have had to have been someone standing above them taking a picture in a downward motion. And with the way she was looking, she would have had to have noticed that someone was there taking a picture of her.
So you did not conclude that, let me try this again. Your conclusion that this was not Julie Jensen was not based on your view of the woman's face.
It was based on that as well.
But what you just told me is that your conclusion was based on the camera angle,
Well,
right?
on the camera angle and the fact that in the rest of, looking at the rest of the photographs, they appeared to be close, but they were not all the same woman. So they were not in the other photographs that were depicted, they were definitely not Julie Jensen.
Well, Julie Jensen had these photographs in her possession, true?
Objection has been asked and answered several times.
It's foundation.
Well, it's pretty clear that she did. Ask a question.
Julie Jensen believed it was her.
Objection
Right?
asked and answered. Several times it's been asked and answered.
It does seem to be abundantly clear from the record.
Did you save these photographs so anybody else could determine whether this was Julie Jensen like she thought it was?
No, I did not.
A camera could have been set up at that angle in her home when she was having sex with her lover, true?
It would have had to have been hung from the ceiling.
Well, there would be other ways to have that camera above them, correct?
I'm not sure what you're driving at, Constance.
You don't know whether her former lover set up such a camera, correct?
No, I don't know that for a fact.
You weren't there, right?
That's correct.
And Julie Jensen would have seen the same camera angle as you, right? Right?
I'm sorry?
Julie Jensen would have seen that the photograph was from the same camera angle as you did, correct?
Correct.
And she was a smart woman, right?
I felt she was.
And she didn't figure out on her own.
And again, I'm not 100% positive that she viewed these pictures.
In 2002, the defense counsel requested that you provide any photographs that you have relating to any of the harassment, correct?
That is correct.
And the first time any photograph was produced was the photograph that's is Exhibit 197. That's the only photograph that's been produced, correct?
That's correct.
And that was not produced until August of 2007.
That's correct.
So it took over 5 years to find that photograph,
Yes.
and no other photographs exist?
No. They were entered into evidence because there are indications. This one as well with the report I did. The bottom line reads off my report, all photos were placed in evidence under PR number 2008. And apparently that's the only photograph that was kept for whatever reason.
October 7th, 1995, there's another report involving your department from Julie Jensen. Is that correct?
October
7th of 95.
one I have is August 25th, and the next one after that is October 6th.
I'm sorry, you have August 25th, that was relating to the last.
That was the one, right?
And then we have October 7th, 1995. True?
I don't have a copy of that report here. This is the last one I had, which is August 25th. And then the next one after that is October 8th. Or October 6th.
Yeah, October 6th, that's what I'm asking about.
Okay.
You can see that on the exhibit behind you, it says October 7th. I guess it says involvement, October 7th, 1995, on the one-page report that you have associated with that.
Yes.
And that was investigated by Officer Paul of your department?
Yes. That's the officer that was assigned.
Okay, and that's just a house property check?
Yes.
Do you have any idea what that was regarding?
Yeah, it may have, I don't know. It may have just been that he called out on, that he was on an extra patrol at that particular time.
Now, the next incident reported was on February 13th, 1996, correct?
Correct.
And that was investigated by yourself and Sergeant Ratsberg, true?
Correct.
And on that occasion, Julie Jensen called Ameritech, right? I'm sorry, it looks
I
like-
believe at that point that Detective Rasberg had called Ameritech.
Okay. And what had happened was there was a trace on the phone at that time, correct?
I'm not aware if it was a trace or at that particular point, if we were able to contact Ameritech and have them look up a particular call that occurred on whatever date at whatever time.
Julie Jensen had reported that their home had received a harassing phone call, correct?
A prank call, correct?
And they reported the phone number from that harassing phone call, correct?
Ameritech did currently.
Okay. And there was a phone number associated with that, correct?
That's correct.
It established that somebody had made a telephone call to their number at that time, correct?
Correct.
Someone from the residence of Tina Thomas, correct?
It appears that way.
And then there was an investigation and nothing happened as a result of that investigation, correct?
That appears so.
And certainly there was no connection to Mr. Jensen making that phone call in that instance, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
There was actually another telephone number that was established as being the source of that phone call, right?
Correct.
On February 16th, there's a request for extra patrol, that could be just for vacation.
Vacation home check, or may have been more photographs that had been found. It could have been for anything.
August 12th, 1996, we have another request for extra patrol. Is that right?
That is correct.
And that again may have just been for vacation type thing, right?
I'm sorry?
That again may have been just for a vacation type situation.
That's correct.
And then these last two contacts are the contacts that you've testified about that relate to your going to Mrs. Jensen's house after she left the voicemail, right?
Correct.
And December 3rd, 1998, which is the date that Mrs. Jensen passed away.
I don't have those here, but I would assume that is correct.
Well, you know that December 3rd, 1998 was the day she
That was
passed
the
away.
last.
Are you aware, Officer Cosman, that during the search of the Jensen home, that Julie Jensen had logs indicating that she reported phone calls during the period of that tracing equipment was put on the telephone line?
I was advised that she had kept notes.
Are you aware of whether those notes reflect that telephone calls were made during the time tracing equipment was on the phone?
I don't believe that. Basically, the log that she kept indicated all calls. And I think there may have been gaps in there where she had traces put on where she didn't receive any calls. Most of the calls that she did receive, that she did log, in my belief were either hangups or something of a nature where she didn't know the person that she was talking to or the person who had actually called.
That is, she logged a number of instances in which she picked up the phone and there was dead air or somebody hung up, something like that.
Correct.
In your experience, that isn't unusual that any of us might get calls where there's dead air or a hang up, correct?
Correct.
But she logged all those over a period of time.
Correct.
But did you examine that information?
No, I did not.
Okay. So you don't know if calls were received during the time tracing equipment was on?
No, I do not.
Did you ever get local telephone records from Ameritech to show, to try to establish whether calls had been made?
No, I did not.
Do you know whether at that time Ameritech or whoever was it your understanding that Ameritech was the local
I
telephone
believe it was
provider?
at that time.
Did you know whether Ameritech as the local phone provider could obtain phone records that originated in some other area code or state?
No, it would have to be within the same. That was my understanding. It would have to be within the same state.
So if she was receiving harassing telephone calls from Illinois, they wouldn't be able to get those records of those calls.
It would be, I believe my understanding was it would be stated like something out of area or something similar to that, to where they wouldn't be able to trace where it originated from.
So your understanding was an out of area call would relate to some some call from a different state or a different area code or either one?
I would assume it would be a different state.
At any time, did you try to take any fingerprints from any of these photographs that had been placed at the Jensens?
No, I did not.
Did you ever actually try to install a wire tap to record calls that came in?
No, we did not.
Did you ever try to stake out Mr. Jensen's place of employment to see if someone came and left a photograph on the truck?
No, I did not.
It's fair to say that any leaving of photos was pretty sporadic, right?
Correct.
It wasn't a daily thing by any means, right?
No, it was not.
I presume your office would not have had the resources to maybe wait a month to see if somebody left a photograph on his vehicle.
No, we wouldn't.
It also, you're aware that it would be pretty expensive to hire a private investigator to do the same thing, correct?
That's correct, though we did suggest that to them.
You can understand how the expense would really roll up if they had to wait 30 days or something before a photograph showed up on the truck.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Did you never talk to the neighbors after having this conversation with Julie Jensen?
No, I did not.
Did you ever talk to Perry Tarika, Julie Jensen's former lover, in person?
No, I have not up until knowing that he was here. Other than that, this is the first time I talked to him was yesterday. I'd never talked to him beforehand.
Whether in full, on the phone, in person, anything else until yesterday?
That is correct.
That's more than 10 years since the last time something had been reported in the nature of harassment at the Jensen home, correct?
Correct.
Did you ever check with the people who worked at Mark's office to see if they had seen anything?
No, I did not.
Did you ever check phone records from Mark at his office?
No, we did not. Our understanding was there were numerous lines from that office that would have been very hard to get the records of.
Well, did you try at all?
I believe someone did. I'm not exactly sure who, but I recall being told that.
At any rate, you're not aware of any records ever being obtained for the phones, correct?
That is correct.
I take it that Exhibit 197, you don't have any evidence that Mr. Jensen obtained this photograph, right?
No, I do not, other than the fact that it was given to me on that date by Julie Jensen.
And they told you that this had been left on his truck, right?
That is correct.
Did you ever, at that time in 1998, there were several stores that specialized in selling pornographic items in the Kenosha area,
There were stores,
in Kenosha County,
yes,
on I-94 and on Highway 32.
yes.
And did you check with any of those stores to see if they had any materials like this or like any of the other materials that you had?
No, I did not.
And out of all these particular acts of harassment that were reported to you, can you identify one single incident that you have proof that Mark Jensen committed?
No. All I have is suspicion. The only fact, if you want to call it a fact, would be that whenever we put a trace on the line, the phone calls would mysteriously stop. And it was only three people that knew that a trace was being put on the phone. That was my own, that's what basically gave me a suspicion. But as far as proof, no.
And as to the photographs, you have absolutely nothing, right?
Correct.
Your only source of information as to whether Julie Jensen told Mark Jensen was Julie Jensen, right?
Correct.
You didn't ask Mark if Julie told him, right?
That is correct.
You didn't check to see whether her reports indicate that some calls were received during the trace, correct?
Correct.
as you've acknowledged, many of these telephone calls were nothing more than hang-up calls, correct?
Correct.
And when there was an out-of-area call, whether there was a trace or not, there was no way to determine where it came from, correct?
Correct.
So that was an additional problem in terms of your being able to track source of calls, correct?
Correct.
You are aware that when she logged these things, there was a substantial number of out-of-area calls, true?
Correct.
Did you ever try to contact Illinois authorities to see whether they'd be able to assist in determining whether the calls originated there?
No, I did not.
That's all I have.
For direct. I forgot the exhibit, did you have, these, what were the reports?
Pardon?
What was the exhibit on the reports?
Oh, I think 198, 199. Do you still have those?
Well, you guys, I have those in front of you, the, all the reports, the packet reports.
Yes.
Turn to the one, for August 25th, 1985, please.
Which one?
August 25th, 1995, date and time reported.
Okay.
Now, and in that report, you're the reporting officer, correct?
Yes, Sam.
And you prepared this report when letters are still fresh in your mind, correct?
That's correct.
And it was Julie Jensen that spoke to you?
I received a call from Julie Jensen, correct?
Well, when she was speaking to you and you responded,
Yes.
she didn't say we found the photograph.
No,
did
she said Mark had phoned him.
She said her husband had found the photographs,
That
correct?
is correct.
Tell us well, do you remember what she said to you without looking at the report?
Is it basically Mark had phone photographs?
At the time when you prepared this report, was the matter still fresh in your mind?
Yeah, it was at that point, yes.
Okay, read it now, please, to yourself.
Where is that in?
Well, start at the second paragraph, though, one begins, RO did respond.
Okay, she basically advised me that, her husband had gone out to the garage to work on a boat and found photos in the boat. And she also gave me one that appeared to be, developed that her husband had found on his truck.
On his truck or in his truck?
In his truck.
On July 3rd, 1995.
That is correct.
And that's this photograph that has been marked as Exhibit 197.
That is correct.
And the handwriting on the back here says 7395, found 7395 in truck. That's, whose handwriting is that?
It appears to be Julie Jensen's handwriting.
And over the years, as you responded to these complaints about the photos in particular, was it predominantly photos that Mark Jensen had recovered or photographs that Julie had found?
They were basically, what Julia told me is that her husband had found photographs around the residence, being outside, near the garage, the front door, on the deck, and even in our shed in the backyard. Julie Jensen had told me that her husband had found them. I don't recall her telling me that she had found them.
And as far as these harassing phone calls, were they all hang-up phone calls, or did she complain about any other types of phone calls?
To her, they were all basically just hang-up calls, or someone would not say anything, there would not be any noise in the background, there wouldn't be any other heavy breathing or anything like that. At times they were just hang up or dead space, and she would hang up on them.
That's when she answered the phone. Did she ever complain of any instances where her husband answered the phone and complained that he's speaking?
She had advised me that Mark, or her husband, had received calls at work where he had discussions with a particular person, but whom they did not know who it was.
Now, at the outset of these harassing phone call activities and harassing activities, you had told Julie to keep a log,
Yes, I did.
and did she keep that log?
Yes, she did.
Did she show you that log from time to time?
No, she did not.
Anything further, go?
Any question? In terms of who found the photographs, that's information you received from Julie, correct?
Correct.
In terms of what happened when she answered telephone calls, that was information you received from Julie, correct?
That is correct.
And she was keeping tabs not just on hang-up calls, but anytime somebody had a wrong number, right? That would be something else you keep track of?
I found it out afterwards, yes.
She kept track of any phone call that wasn't obviously for one of the Jensens, basically, right?
That is correct.
Those hang-up calls happened at all times of the day?
Mostly during the day when she was home alone.
They happened at all times of the day. She recorded hang-up calls, right?
Right.
That's all.
The question?
Nothing further.
You guys-
Are you moving 15 in?
I am.
Right, 15 will be received. All right, what's next for us?
Steve, call Dave Nearing to the stand.
What number is that? $52, thank you. All the way up here, sir. You just remain standing. Raise your right hand. So I swear the testimony is meant to be the truth, whole truth, not but the truth, so help you God. Thank you. Get as close as you can to that microphone, the smaller one. Spell your first and last name for the reporter.
David, D-A-V-I-D, Nearing, N-E-H-R-I-N-G.
Thank you.
Mr. Nearing, do you know a person by the name of Mark Jensen?
I do.
Do you see him anywhere in this courtroom today?
I do.
Could you point to him, describe what he's wearing?
Eyes over there wearing the headphones.
I request the record show the witnesses identified the defendant.
All right, the witness has identified Mr. Jensen here in open court.
Can you tell the jury when and where you first met Mark Jensen?
I first met him around 1990 or 1991 when I worked at Prudential Base Securities in Milwaukee, and Mark had joined the company around that time.
So at that, when did you first start working for Prudential Bach?
I believe 1987.
So by the time Mark Jensen had joined in 1990 or 91, you'd been there for 4 years or so.
That's correct.
And after Mark Jensen joined the firm, did you and he become better acquainted?
Yes, we did. We became friends.
How often would you speak to him on a daily or weekly basis?
Both, many times daily and all week long.
How would you describe your relationship with him?
It was good.
So was it a friendship or a business relationship or both?
No, it was a friendship. I got to know his wife and son, and we did things socially.
Do you remember a time in 90 or 91, shortly after Mark Jensen joined Prudential, back walking into his office and finding something on the desk?
I do.
Tell the jury about that.
It was a smaller 8x10, 8x12 stenographer's notebook. And inside of it, the entire thing was sketches of penises.
Judge, I move to strike as irrelevant.
What's the relevance, Mr. Jambois?
Well, Your Honor, the defendant's preoccupation with penises is going to be central to a good portion of the other evidence in this case. It was the defendant, there's going to be testimony that there were 2,200 penis photos found on Mark Jensen's office computer. And many of these photos were of the sort that were being left around the residence from 91 through 98. And a point of contention is that the defense is saying that it wasn't Mark Jensen that was leaving them there. And the state has clear evidence that it was Mark Jensen that produced them and left them around there. And this evidence here further reflects the defendant's preoccupation with penises. Furthermore, there's going to be testimony from his, from Kelly. Well, her name was Kelly Labonte, then Kelly Greenman, then Kelly Labonte again, then Kelly Jensen, in which she also testifies about Mark Jensen examining her in great detail about each and every penis she'd ever seen.
To this all being brought out in front of the jury. My objection was relevancy. I'm not asking about what every other witness for the rest of the trial is going to say. The relevancy objection is this witness talked about sketches versus photos. I don't understand the relevancy of something that happened from 1990 or 1991 as it relates to
Well, going back, folks, but I apologize for your early break here. All right, the jury is outside the courtroom. Ms. Krause, you indicated you object to what was said in front. I don't know what the lawyers are going to say, so I wish I could.
I understand that, but my objection was not a
I know,
speaking
so
objection.
you can continue. Go ahead.
Judge, I guess my concern is this. According to what I've heard this morning, and this is the first time the defense has been notified that Mr. Nearing was going to say this, was this morning. And allegedly this book that was found was like handwritten drawings of penis pictures. There's nothing in the rest of this trial that indicates that there is anything that matches these handwritten drawings to photographs of someone having sex or performing oral sex. So I just don't see the relevancy of something that happened in 1991 with handwritten drawings if it actually happened.
Well, if Mr. Jambois can tie it up, I think it's relevant to the photos. I don't know if he can tie it up, and that the only way we're going to find out is through this witness now. So
Well, through this witness, Your Honor, and other witnesses, and just, it should hardly come as a surprise that we're going to be talking about penises in this trial. That in Jensen 2, the Court of
We are
Appeals-
Jensen 3 for the record, right?
I know we're on Jensen 3, but if you go back and read Jensen 2, the Court of Appeals decision, the word penis appeared 115 times in that decision. I'm pretty sure that set a new record for Court of Appeals decisions in the state of Wisconsin. Mr. Jensen's preoccupation with penises is a major part of the state's case. It demonstrates why the defendant was so upset about this one affair that Julie had with this Perry Tarika, that it occupied him throughout the course of his entire relationship with her. And Mr. Nearing will testify that he never forgot about it. It's something that bothered him throughout the entire time that he knew Mark Jensen, and it ate away at him. We just had testimony the other day from Ed Klug, in which Ed Klug testifies about there being penis drawings at this drunken party at the Marriott Hotel on November 5th, 6th, or 7th of 1998. Kelly Labonte, or I don't know what her last name is right now, but when she testifies later today, she's going to testify about Mark Jensen examining her, about the size, shape, and circumference of every penis she'd ever seen. And we have his notes that he took during that conversation, and they're going to be introduced into evidence. And those are also penis drawings that Mark Jensen did, that he produced. So Mark Jensen's very bizarre, strange, unusual preoccupation with penises and penis drawings is very much a part of the state's case. And it does tend, and then along with his 2,200 penis photos that were in his office computer, it will afford the jury the opportunity to draw the most very reasonable inference that it was Mark Jensen was the source of these photos that are being left around the residence. We're also going to hear testimony about Mark Jensen assuming the identity of other people while on the internet. So he did this with, there's going to be testimony about that when Jason Ruff testifies. He's the computer expert, where Mark Jensen manufactured an email with a bunch of penis photos attached to it and made it look like it came from Turtle to Julie Jensen, when actually the evidence will show that Mark Jensen manufactured it, created it, sent it to himself, then deleted his name from the from folder and from the to section, replacing them with Turtle and Julie Jensen, respectively. There's going to be testimony about how when he was working at Stifel Nicholas, and Mark Jensen was the office manager at Stifel Nicholas, or the senior vice president at Stifel Nicholas in the Racine office, that he was sending emails to Barry Peterson using the moniker, quote, warm Irish eyes, unquote. So he as though Barry Peterson was receiving these emails on this dating app, and it looked like it was coming from a person named Warm Irish Eyes. And these emails also contained penis photos and questions like, is yours as big as this, or things of that sort. It just shows a very strange, bizarre preoccupation with penises. And that's very much a central part of the state's case, especially with regard to other X evidence.
Go ahead.
I don't think it's relevant. I don't think it goes to whether or not Mr. Jensen committed a first-degree intentional homicide. That's the argument that I'm making. I understand that the court is saying that there might be a link up. I guess my concern is if there's no link up, it's already out.
Well, I think it's relevant, and I'm only going to say it once. I think there's so much penis evidence in this case. It's already been directed through the video. There's already been pictures. And I did read Jensen too, and the Court of Appeals mentioned it numerous times, more than any other case I've ever seen. And I think the issue is the weight of the evidence, and that's something for the jury. And the defense is free to argue that later. And let the jury decide whether this evidence has any bearing here. But I think it's an issue that's been presented now by the state, and I will allow it. So let's bring back the jury, and we will continue.
If we're going to have further,
Hang on.
if If we're going to have further arguments in front of the jury about other witnesses' testimony, I would ask that that be outside the presence of the jury. think
I
that
agree
that
with you, but I didn't know
Yeah, I-
what Mr. Jamboys was going to
I
say.
would say this, that the kind of, when you raise an objection on relevancy, it's kind of an invited response that the prosecutor's going to explain why it's relevant. So I suppose you could ask for a sidebar, but if you're going to object on relevance grounds, then are we going to immediately break? Because I was just responding to the objection.
I think that if we're going to go into what other witnesses are going to testify, then the prosecution should have asked for a sidebar. My objection was simple. I did not go into it more because I didn't think I should do that in front of the jury.
I agree. And if it's relevance, I'll let you know whether I'm going to sustain it right away or we need more argument. So we're all on the same page.
Thank
Okay.
you, Honor.
All right. Bring the jury back. You can have a seat. All right, have a seat, folks. Thank you for your patience. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we're going to continue. The objection's been overruled, so Mr. Jamboys, you can ask your question.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Mr. Nearing, can you please tell the jury what you found when you walked into Mr. Jensen's office that one day when Mr. Jensen was not in there?
Yeah, there was a 6x8, 8x10 stenographer's notebook, and it was filled with sketches of penises. Each page had a different illustration.
And do you remember any notes or notations or anything about the penis photos? Or
Not that I
penis
recall, it was
drawings?
just sketches.
And do you have an estimate about how many there were? How many different penis?
The notebook seemed to be filled with them.
And this was within the first year or two that after you'd met Mark Jensen?
Yeah, first year or two.
Did you and he ever discuss that notebook?
No,
Do you remember why you'd gone into his office that day?
I do not.
You weren't in there to snoop around, though. You just got in there for some reason. You just don't remember what it was.
No, I don't recall, but no.
So you indicated that as you were first getting to know Mark Jensen, you and he would socialize together.
Yes,
Did your families also socialize together?
yes.
What were the kind of things that you and your family would do with him and his family?
Well, in the winter, we'd go up to Door County for a weekend for cross-country skiing. We'd also take weekends for bicycle trips with both families. And of course, we'd have dinner at one another's homes over the years as well.
So over the course of the years, you not only got to know Mark Jensen, you also got to know his wife, Julie.
That's correct.
What was your impression of Julie as a mother and as a person?
Great on both accounts. She was a caring and loving mother, and she came across that way in every situation.
Now, at some point in 1998, you left Prudential Beck and you joined Stifel Nicholas. Can you tell us about that?
That's correct. A couple of the top people at repeat your question, please.
So at some point in 1998, you left Prudential Beck and you joined Stifel Nicholas. Is that true?
No. I went from Beige to Robert Baird.
Oh, okay. So, and then when did you go from Begg to Robert Baird?
How long?
Yeah, how long? When was it that you went from Prudential back to Robert Baird?
Yeah, I think it was around from 87 to 92, 93 that I was at Prudential Beige. And then I went to Baird. And then from 92, 93 to 98, I was at Baird. And after 1998, we opened the Stifel Nicholas office in Racine.
So when you left Prudential Beck to go to Robert Baird, did Mark Jensen go with you?
Yeah, not to the same office, but we went at more or less the same time.
To the same company?
That's correct.
And which office did you go to?
I stayed in downtown Milwaukee, and Mark went to Kenosha.
Did you continue to talk to Mark Jensen on a regular basis between 1992 and 1998?
Most likely every day.
So even though your offices were in different cities, you would still talk to each other regularly?
Absolutely.
And then in 1998, at some point, you left Robert Baird and you went to Stifel Nicholas. Is that true?
That's correct.
And did Mark Jensen leave Robert Baird and go to Stifel Nicholas at the same time?
Yes.
And did that alter your office situation?
Pardon me?
Did that alter your office situation?
In what way?
Well, when you were with Robert Baird from 1992 to 1998, where was your office?
In Milwaukee.
And when you were with Stifel Nicholas from 1998 onward, where was your office?
In Racine.
Okay, so do you remember when it was in 1998 that you left Robert Baird and went to Stifel Nicholas?
Do I remember when it was?
Yes.
Yes, as in the summer, June or July.
And when you left your Robert Baird and you went to Stifel Nicholas, then you also moved your office?
That's correct.
And your office was moved to the Racine office?
That's correct.
And who else was in the Racine office with you? What other brokers were in the Racine office with you in June of 1998 when you moved there?
I believe when we opened the office, Barry Peterson was there. And I think that's all at the time we opened the office.
Well, you were there. Was Mark Jensen there?
Well, of course.
So it was you, Barry Peterson, and Mark Jensen that were in that office?
I believe so.
And do you remember when you moved from Robert Baird to Stifel Nicholas, did you meet anybody from St. Louis, from the St. Louis office of Stifel Nicholas?
Yes, there were people, I'm not sure how many, that came from St. Louis to help us open up the office.
Was one of those persons a woman by the name of Kelly Labonte?
Yes,
So you met Kelly Labonte when you opened your Racine office?
that's correct.
Now, at some point, did you notice anything about Mark Jensen and Kelly Labonte?
Yeah, they got rather close.
What do you mean by that?
A personal relationship, if you will.
What evidence, what information did you see, or what was it that Mark Jensen said or did that caused you to believe that he was developing a relationship with Kelly Labonte?
He talked about it. He talked about her. He talked about his interest.
What did he tell you about his interest in Kelly Labonte?
Just in talking about it, you could tell it was sincere. And
Well, was it a romantic interest or was it a platonic interest?
no, it became romantic, and I don't know exactly when that occurred.
Did you and Mark Jensen ever talk about the impact this might have on his marriage?
Yes, we did.
Tell us about the conversation that you can recall having between you and Mark Jensen concerning the impact this affair could have on his marriage.
We talked about it, and he had mentioned that he was going to see her on weekends and such. And I just suggested to him that it wasn't a good idea. And part of the conversation was always the hurt and anger that he felt over the affair that his wife had had years earlier. And in a way, he was trying to use that as a justification for what he was doing. And I strongly suggested to him that it wasn't a good idea.
Did you ever discuss with him the issues pertaining to child custody and what would happen if one spouse moved away with the children?
Yes, we did. He was well aware that he could lose custody of the kids, or that he'd have to divide all of his assets in half.
And how did he respond? How did he address that with you, if you can recall?
Well, there wasn't any way to really finalize that discussion. It was just something that was talked about.
Now, throughout the time that you knew Mark Jensen, from 1991 onward, how would you describe his computer skills?
He was very familiar. He had a lot of interesting software, and he was very comfortable with and interested in computers.
You knew how to use a computer too, didn't you?
Pardon me?
You knew how to use a computer as well, didn't you?
Not as well. I didn't know how to use a computer and things like that, but Mark was always a step or two ahead.
Whenever you'd have a problem with the computers, would you talk to Mark about it?
With certain business-related software, we talked about it, yes.
And Mark seemed to know the answer.
Mark had the answers because it was Mark's software.
Now, at some point, about the time you were having these conversations with Mark about the pitfalls of divorce, did he start talking to you about Julie's conditions?
Yes, he did.
And what was he telling you about Julie's condition?
A lot of things. He said that she was depressed, that she didn't want to do anything, that she was losing weight. He said that I wouldn't recognize her if I saw her. She had lost so much weight.
So when you heard him talking about Julie in this fashion, were you concerned about Julie?
Yes, of course.
So what, if anything, did you do in response to your concern about Julie?
We had not seen them together in a long time because of the ongoing relationship that was developing with Kelly Labonte. So I talked to my wife about it and asked her if she'd give Julie a call and take her out to lunch and maybe cheer her up.
You remember about when that conversation occurred between you and your wife?
I believe it was a week or two before she passed.
And do you know if your wife was ever able to get a hold of Julie?
Oh, yes, she was.
And did she have lunch with Julie?
Yes, she did.
And after your wife had her lunch with Julie, did she relate to you what her perceptions of Julie?
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
I didn't ask him what they were. I
You're
just
getting
asked,
really close, so.
yeah, I wasn't going to go there, Judge, because Sharon's
I
the next
understand, but
witness.
you're really close. You're right on the cliff there. So let's ask another question.
Now, during this time that Mark was telling you about Julie's condition, did you ever make any observations of things that he was doing on his computer?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
He frequently was on the computer searching for what he told me were drug interactions. He was trying to figure out why her behavior, her demeanor had changed so much and why her health was deteriorating. And so
That's what he was telling you. He told you that he was doing that. He told you he was looking for drug interactions, and that was the reason he gave you for looking for drug interactions.
that's correct.
Leading.
Could you just rephrase the question, Mr. Chairman?
So the only thing you know about why Mark Jensen was looking at these things is what Mark Jensen told you, correct?
That's correct.
So quite aside from what Mark Jensen told you about why he was looking at these things, what were the things that you saw on the internet, on his computer when you walk into his office?
I never really saw anything on the computer. I'd wander into his office. We were close together. We were good friends. I'd maybe sit in a chair across from him, and he'd be working away, and I'd ask him what he was doing, and that was the response I would get, that he was looking for drug interactions.
So how often would you walk into his office and see or hear about him looking at drug interactions on the computer?
As I think back, it was very, very frequently. It was both before her death and after her death.
Now, switching gears to December 3rd, 1998. Were you in the office on December 3rd, 1998?
Yes.
And how big an office was this? How many people altogether were in the office? If you add in all the brokers and all the support personnel, how many people were in the office?
I don't know exactly how many were in there at that time. We had people that would join us and people that would leave, but roughly half dozen.
So it was a relatively small office.
It was a small office. That's correct.
And on December 3rd, 1998, do you remember Mark Jensen coming into the office on December 3rd, 1998?
I do not.
You didn't see him on December 3rd, 1998.
That's correct.
On the morning of December 4th, 1998, do you recall having a conversation with Mark Jensen?
Yes, Mark called me and told me that Julie had passed.
Did he indicate to you whether he'd be in the office on December 4th?
Pardon me?
Did he indicate to you whether or not he would be in the office on December 4th?
I don't believe so.
At some point after Julie's death, do you remember having a conversation with Mark Jensen about whether or not Kelly Labonte should be at Julie's wake or at her funeral or come into his residence?
Yes, I did.
Tell the jury about that conversation.
Again, we'd have frequent conversations every day, and he brought up the issue of whether or not it would be appropriate for Kelly to be at the wake. And I don't know if it was the same conversation, but shortly thereabouts, he asked if what my thoughts were if Julie were to move into his home.
Julie or Kelly?
Pardon me, Kelly.
So this was within a matter of days of Julie's death?
That's correct.
And he was asking you about whether his girlfriend should come to his wife's wake and funeral?
That's correct.
And what advice did you give him?
I said it was not a good idea.
And this conversation about whether or not Kelly should move into his residence, he should have Kelly move into this residence, how much time elapsed between Julie's death and this conversation that you have with Mark Jensen about Kelly moving into his residence?
I can't recall exactly, but it was in very short order. It wasn't long.
More than a week or less than a week?
I can't recall, but maybe a week or two at the most, I would think.
And when he was asking you about whether or not you thought it advisable for Kelly to move into his residence, what was your advice at that time?
Rather low key, but just that it was not a good idea.
Now, you indicated there was a person in your office by the name Barry Peterson. Is that true?
Yes.
Now, did Mark ever have any conversation with you about spoofing Barry Peterson?
Yes, he did.
Tell the jury about that.
Barry was single at the time and apparently had been on a single dating site. And so Mark created a person that he called Warm Irish Eyes. It was supposedly a woman. And he responded to or started to come on to Barry Peterson as this woman named Warm Irish Eyes.
So Mark would tell you about this
Yes, he did.
more than one occasion?
Yes.
And these emails that were being sent to Barry Peterson as though they were coming from Warm Irish Eyes, these were emails that were created by Mark Jensen. Is that true?
That's correct.
And did you learn what these emails were, what they contained, or any attachments to these emails?
He would have pictures of penises and would inquire to Barry Peterson whether or not he was that big or things of that nature.
And at the time Barry Peterson was receiving these emails, they appeared to be from Warm Irish Eyes,
Yes,
not from Mark Jensen.
that's correct.
During the course of your employment at Stifel Nicholas, did you ever come to know a person by the name of Ed Klug?
Yes.
What can you tell us about Ed Klug?
Objection relevance. I don't know where this is going.
Overruled, go ahead.
What can you tell us about Ed Klug?
I believe Ed was a Robert Baird broker also, and I believe Mark recruited him to come and open an office in Appleton for Stifel Nicholas.
Do you remember after Julie's death ever having a conversation with Ed Klug about any conversations that Ed Klug and Mark Jensen had had before Julie's death?
I do.
So do you remember where that conversation occurred between you and Ed Klug?
I believe the first time it was on a plane. We had both been in Boston for a meeting, and on the way back, Ed told me that Mark said he was going to kill her.
Did Ed tell you where that conversation had occurred between him and Mark?
I believe he said it occurred in St. Louis.
So can you tell the jury in a brokerage firm, the sort that you had at Prudential Bach and Robert Baird and Stifel Nicholas, is there a process or a procedure regarding the opening of mail or taking of phone calls?
Yes, they're different as far as opening mail. The front office would receive the mail, and they would always open every piece. Even if it was marked personal, they'd open it to see what was in it. Most of the phone calls also went through the front office, but we did have direct lines, and so a person could contact us directly without going through the front office.
Now, from the time that you first met and worked with Mark Jensen right up through December 3rd, 1998, Do you recall Mark Jensen ever complaining, or any member of the front desk ever complaining about receiving harassing phone calls or receiving explicit or pornographic photos at the office?
Repeat the question, please.
Did any support person, anybody that opens the mail, ever indicate to you that they'd received, or complained to Mark Jensen that they'd received or opened in the mail a packet containing pornographic photos?
No.
And something like that would stand out in your mind.
Yes.
So, starting with Prudential Bach, no such email, no such photos were in the mail at Prudential Bach or Robert Baird or at Stifel Nicholas at the office. Is that true?
Opened by the front office. That's correct.
And all of the mail was opened by the front office. Isn't that true?
That's the policy.
At some point after Julie's death, do you recall having a conversation with Mark about, and Mark wanting to get his home computer back from the authorities?
I do.
Tell the jury about that conversation.
The conversation wasn't so much about wanting to get it back. It was a general conversation, and he had expressed concern previously too about them having his computer, and it was a home computer, but he used it for business at home as well, and he wanted to get it back. And on this particular day, it was a Friday afternoon, we were talking about it, and again, it was, they took my home computer, he'd like to have it back. And I mentioned to him that given that they had taken his computer and wouldn't give it back, I was surprised they hadn't come in and taken his office computer as well.
You had that conversation on a Friday afternoon,
That's correct.
and you recall having a conversation with Mark Jensen the next Monday morning?
Yeah, Monday morning, first thing, Mark told me his computer was fried. And
His work computer was
his
fried.
work computer, the computer in the office, said it was fried, and he'd have to call St. Louis and have them send him another.
Did Mark ever talk to you about possible ways in which one could fry the hard drive on a computer?
Yes, years earlier, and I don't remember when, but he had told me when he was working at Baird, there was an individual there that he didn't get along with, and so he took a large magnet and applied it to the hard drive, and the intent was to destroy the data on the hard drive.
Did Mark ever tell you or talk to you about what happened when he found Julie dead?
Yes.
What did he tell you? Well, specifically, did he tell you anything about what he did with the boys when he got home that day?
Yeah, he said it felt as though something wasn't right. And so I believe that he said he had the boys wait, and he went into the house and found that Julie had passed.
So normally he didn't have the children go in the house with him. He had them wait in the car.
Yeah, I would think normally that I don't know.
Objection leading.
Yeah,
That's not
I
what
don't-
Mr. Nearing said.
Well,
Just go ahead, Mr. Chambers.
I don't want to tell you what Mr. Nearing, what Mark Jensen said to you. What did Mark Jensen actually say to you about the boys when he came home that day?
they'd asked him to wait behind while he went in to check on Mom.
And that's when, and what happened then after he had the boys wait in the car?
Objection. Move to strike. That's not what Mr. Nearing said.
Overruled. Go ahead, Mr. Jambois.
Once again, please.
What? Just I don't want to put words in your mouth. So what is it that Mark Jensen told you about that? What he did with the boys when he got home that day?
Once more, Bob, I don't understand the question.
Mark Jensen talked to you about coming home that day,
That's
correct?
correct.
And what, if anything, did he tell you about what he did with the boys before he went into the house?
Well, he didn't say specifically what he did with them. What I got out of the conversation, it was he went into the house to check on Julie before the boys did.
And did he tell you what he, if any, how he had what he did with the boys before he went into the house to check on Julie?
No.
Did he tell you he said that he felt that might be something wrong with Julie, and that's?
Well, that's correct. He said something didn't feel right. He thought something was amiss.
And so what did he, and he told you he went into the house, and did he tell you what he did with the boys at that point?
That's correct.
What did he do with the boys at that point?
Oh, I have no idea.
Did Mark ever tell you anything about Julie getting sick while he was at the Blueprint in November of 1998?
He did.
Tell the jury what he told you.
Again, I was getting the constant stories about how ill she was and how poorly she was doing. And he mentioned that she had thrown up while he was gone.
At the Blueprint?
That's while he was in St. Louis at the Blueprint. That's correct.
During the time that you knew Mark Jensen from 1990 or 91 through Julie's death in December of 1998, did you ever get the impression that Mark Jensen had ever come to terms with or forgiven Julie for that one affair that she'd had in early 90 or 91?
No, he was seriously hurt and angered. And from very early on, when I first met him, that came across right up until the very end. He never got over it.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Who's doing the cross?
I am Jensen.
Go ahead.
Mr. Neering, you said you worked with Mr. Jensen starting sometime in 1990 or 1991.
That's
Do
correct.
you remember what year it was? Whether it was 1990 or 1991?
Yes.
Which one was it?
Oh, I cannot remember. I started there in '87, and we were there a couple years, before we left.
So you were working with Mark Jensen at that location a couple of years before you both separated and went to different offices for Baird.
That's correct.
So you had a lot of conversations with Mr. Jensen
Many, many, many. Yes,
about work,
that's correct.
about families,
That's correct.
about children.
Yes.
And it'd be fair to say that during all of those conversations, you didn't write them down anywhere.
Not a word.
You weren't taking notes.
Not a word.
You weren't writing them in a journal.
No words in the journal.
You guys were friends. You were just talking.
That's correct.
You worked with Mark at Prudential, you said, for a couple of years. Can you tell us what Mr. Jensen's schedule was? What time he got in each day?
Mark was always a later starter, and he would stay longer. So his schedule, of course, was Monday through Friday. And while I might be there at 7 or 8, Mark might not get there until 9 or 10. And I might leave a little earlier. Mark might stay a little later.
So it'd be fair to say there was no time clock to punch into.
Never.
Mr. Jensen wouldn't come by your office and say, hey, just so you know, I'm here today.
No, he never came by and said, just so you know, I'm here today. But I would know he was there. His office was next to mine. We'd say hello.
Because you talk throughout the day.
That's correct.
So you would know that he would be at work.
That's correct.
And that was when you were working at Prudential.
That's correct.
Now, at some point, you separated and he went to Baird in Kenosha and you were at Baird in Milwaukee.
That's correct.
And during that time, you continued to talk to each other
Yes.
on the phone,
Daily,
About work?
mostly.
About family?
That's correct.
Because your families actually got together.
That's correct.
I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but I want to talk a little bit about this time when you were at Baird. When Mr. Jensen was at Baird in Kenosha and you were at Baird in Milwaukee, you would have no information about phone calls he may have received.
I would have no firsthand information. That's correct.
You wouldn't have been talking to the front office staff of the Baird in Kenosha.
Yeah, no, I would not.
You wouldn't be asking them what mail they had opened.
That's correct.
You wouldn't have been asking them about what phone calls they had received.
Correct.
That wasn't your office staff.
That's correct.
Your office staff was actually in Milwaukee.
That's correct.
And that was from sometime 1993 to 1998.
That's correct.
Now, you talked a little bit about these computer searches that you say Mr. Jensen conducted, correct?
That's correct.
You didn't see him conduct any searches.
I didn't see the screen, but I saw him conducting the searches.
What you mean by seeing him conducting the searches, you saw his fingers typing on a keyboard.
No, what I mean is he told me that's what he was doing.
I understand what he told you, sir. I'm asking what you actually saw, though. What you saw was his fingers typing on a keyboard.
That's correct.
You didn't actually see the screen.
That's correct.
So I want to talk a little bit about Mr. Jensen's office in Baird in 1998. Okay?
Mhm.
When you walked in the door, there was like a U-shaped desk that you would see in front of you.
At Baird and Kenosha?
No, at Stifel in 1998.
Please repeat the description.
Thank you. When you walked in the door of the office, there was like a U-shaped desk that you would see as you were walking in.
Yes.
And there would be a monitor on one corner of the desk. Is that a yes?
Correct. Yes.
And there would be a monitor on a second corner.
Yes.
He actually had two monitors.
Yes. For
And
two
it'd be-
people.
Thank you. And it would be fair to say that as you walked in the door, you could see the monitors.
That's correct.
Now, you said that when you talked to Mr. Jensen, you actually sat across from his desk.
That's correct.
And it was when you were sitting across from his desk that you couldn't see the monitors.
I'd sit across from him, or he had a credenza. There was the desk in front, and then chairs directly opposite. And off to the side was a long credenza, maybe 6 or 8 feet long. So a lot of times I'd wander in, as Mark did in my office, and stop next to his desk, beside it, and lean onto the credenza. So it was both, sitting across from him and sitting right next to him, standing right next to him, leaning up against the credenza.
So what I asked, though, is when you were sitting across from him at those chairs, you couldn't see the monitors.
No, I never saw the monitor on any of the searches.
So as he was doing all of these searches that he was telling you about drug interactions, you never looked at the monitor.
That's correct.
And what he said to you was that he was concerned about Julie's change in behavior. Correct?
Yes,
And he was concerned, and he expressed that concern to you.
yes, he did.
And he was concerned because she wasn't eating the same.
That's what he said.
And he was concerned, and what he said to you was that she was losing weight
That's correct.
and that she would lock herself in the bedroom.
I don't think I said that yet, but he did.
He told you that.
Yes.
An additional concern he expressed to you was that she didn't want to do anything.
That's correct.
And she seemed depressed.
Pardon me?
And that she seemed depressed.
That's correct.
Now, in 1998, you and Mr. Jensen had been friends for 7 years.
Okay.
Is
Sounds
that fair
about
to
right.
say?
That's correct.
That's what you testified to. I'm just putting.
Yeah,
a
I
number
didn't
on
have
it.
a number, but you're right. You did that math.
And during that time, you talked about a lot of things,
We did.
personal things,
Sometimes.
including Julie Jensen's affair
Yes,
and how that hurt Mr. Jensen
that's correct.
and how he was upset about it.
Yes.
And I think your testimony was he was angry about it.
And I said hurt, very hurt and angry.
And he confided in you about those things.
Yes,
And when he was talking about his wife in 1998, he was confiding in you about what he saw.
that's correct.
So when Mr. Jensen talked to you about looking up drug interactions, I think you said he did it both before Ms. Jensen's passing and after her passing.
That's correct.
And that was on the work computer.
That's correct.
And did he talk to you about the prescription medication she had been prescribed by a doctor?
Specific ones?
Yes.
Not that I ever recall.
Did he talk to you about his concern about her taking an unusual amount of aspirin?
No,
Did he talk to you at all about antidepressants?
no.
I want to talk to you a little bit about these computers.
Okay.
You just told this jury that you had a conversation with Mr. Jensen at some point about both his home and work computers.
Yes,
And I think you said it was on a Friday.
that's correct.
What day was that?
I have no idea.
What month was that?
I do not remember.
What year was that?
I don't recall. I'm sorry.
And at that time, Mr. Jensen when he worked at Stifel, he had actually 2 computers in his office
Yeah, he had a personal computer and a company computer.
and used his personal and company computer for work.
That's correct.
And he had those computers through the time that he was arrested in this case.
Yes,
And you actually had information that his work computer had been sent to St. Louis.
you've kind of jumped ahead on the timeline.
I have jumped ahead on the timeline. That's fair. So when you spoke to Mr. Jensen about this damage to his work computer, he advised you that he had sent it to St. Louis.
That's correct.
And it's fair to say that working for a stock brokerage firm, there's certain protocols you have to follow.
There are departments that take care of different things. That's correct.
And because you're dealing with stocks and trading and people's personal information and money, there's specific protocols you have to follow.
Yes,
And that's why people at the front desk open the mail,
yes,
because you need to make sure that you're following whatever protocols have been set by the company.
that's correct.
And the main location for most of the departments for Stifel Nicholas, am I saying that right, sir?
Yes,
Is in St. Louis.
that's the home office.
So that's where a lot of the things happen, is at the home office.
That's correct. We're just a small branch.
In fact, you said you had like a half a dozen people working there.
That's right.
So if something was to happen with a work computer, it would be sent to St. Louis.
Right. Any kind of issues that we would have like that were resolved
By St. Louis.
by St. Louis.
Do you remember in 2002, everyone in Stifel Nicholas getting brand new work computers?
I don't remember the year, but there was a time when everybody got an update. That's correct.
Another thing that the home office can do is conduct audits on computers.
I don't know anything about that.
Do you know anything about the fact that they can remotely access your computer and see what you're doing?
I assumed as much, but back then I'm not so sure. In fact, I would say no, I didn't think that was occurring.
Sir, you testified previously in this case, correct?
Yes, I did.
And that was in January of 2008.
You have to help me with the date. I do not remember when it was.
Do you remember it being early January 2008?
If you say so, I do not remember.
That's fair. You were asked on page 82, line 21, and on occasion will conduct audits, correct? And your answer was yes.
I'm not sure of the context. The branch would be audited. That people would come in and they'd go through stuff. Your earlier question was about, did I think they could see everything we were doing on our computers? And I believe those are two different issues.
January, he testified January 8th.
That's fair. I didn't ask him. I said
Misunderstood.
he didn't know the exact date.
Okay.
So you knew that they did conduct audits, though, of computers and other business activity.
They would come in and make sure records were kept properly, that people were not gaining access to records that they shouldn't gain access to, and things of that nature. I don't believe they would have ever looked at individual computers or how they were used or what was on them. Back then, it was kind of in the early stages, and we didn't have the oversight that we had today or at the end.
Sure, sir. On page 117, I don't know what line, 25, 24, 23, 22,
Page 117.
19, 118, 17, 16. Line 16. When asked about system checks from the home office, you received a question. Did that ever happen to your knowledge in your office? Answer. You mean a system check on computers? Question. Mm-hmm. Answer. A system check by the home office? Question. Yes. Answer. They routinely monitor various things.
I guess I would stand by what I said today, as opposed to,
As opposed to 2008, which
I'm not
was-
sure what I was thinking then or what I meant.
That's fair, sir. Do you still work for Stifel Nicholas?
No, I retired 9 years ago.
So you haven't had any system checks done on your computer in the last 9 years?
Well, nowadays you never know.
After Julie Jensen passed away, you spoke to law enforcement.
That's correct.
And that wasn't actually until 2003? Does that sound right?
Again, as I reread my testimony from the last trial, I couldn't get my head around the dates. So if that's when I saw him or that's when I contacted them, that's correct. But I can't sit here and tell you it was in 2003 in this month. I just don't, it's just not in my head.
That sounds wrong because it is wrong. It was March 22nd, 2002. that
Okay,
you
yeah,
spoke to
whenever
law
it was,
enforcement.
I don't remember.
You didn't contact anyone in law enforcement in 1998.
I did not.
You didn't contact anyone in law enforcement in 1999.
No, I did not.
You didn't contact anyone in law enforcement in 2000.
No, I believe the first contact was after Mark was arrested. I think I contacted Paul Ratzberg, Detective
Yeah.
Ratzberg.
And Mr. Jensen was arrested in 2002.
Okay.
And that's when you then contacted
I
Detective Ratzberg.
contacted him.
And he wanted to talk to you about what you knew about the Jensens
That's correct.
and what you knew about Mark Jensen,
That's correct.
because you had worked for him so long.
That's correct.
You had had hundreds of conversations.
Yes.
You guys were friends.
Yes.
He had confided in you.
Yes.
And Detective Ratzberg wanted that information.
Yes.
He asked you questions.
He did.
And you answered those questions.
That's correct.
And you answered those questions truthfully.
That's correct.
And as Detective Ratzberg was asking you questions and you were answering those questions truthfully, Detective Ratzberg was taking notes.
That's correct.
Notes on what you said.
That's correct.
And if he was concerned about something you said or unclear, he would ask you to clarify it.
Yes.
After you spoke to Detective Ratzberg, you wrote a written statement.
Okay.
Do you remember writing out a statement after you talked to Detective Ratsberg?
I can't remember if I wrote them or if he wrote them and I signed them, but
Let's find out.
things were put in writing.
Madam Clerk, can I have an exhibit sticker? Mr. Aaron, I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibit number 16. Do you recognize that?
Looks like a report with my initials at the bottom.
So since I don't know your handwriting or Detective Ratsberg, is that your handwriting or Detective Ratsberg?
I don't write in cursive. I print, and this is printed, but I'm not sure it's my handwriting. It is my initials at the bottom.
At the bottom of each page, there's actually a spot where you initial.
That's correct.
And that would have been after reviewing and or writing this statement.
That's correct. Yeah, is there a date on this?
Yes, March 22nd.
Okay.
And as you and I just both found, March 22nd.
Okay.
Now, sir, you also testified previously in this case,
Yes,
2 times.
if you say so.
I do say so. Do you remember testifying 2 times?
There's a lot of it I don't remember. So
A lot you just can't remember.
that's correct.
One of the times was on August 28th of 2007, and the other ones were, which we just talked about, was January 9th to January 10th of 2008.
Okay.
And when you testified on those days, you actually took the stand, correct?
I remember doing that.
Much like you are doing it today.
That's correct.
You raised your right hand,
Yes, I did.
you swore to tell the truth,
Yes,
and you told the truth.
that's correct.
You were asked questions by Attorney Jamboys,
That's correct.
and you answered those questions.
I did.
You were also asked questions by defense counsel,
I
not
did.
me,
I did. Or yes, I answered them.
and you answered them truthfully.
That's correct.
I want to talk to you about some of the statements that you just said today for the first time.
Okay.
You testified today that in 1990 or 1991, you walked into Mark Jensen's office and flipped through a journal,
Hey, what?
like a stenographer notepad, I think you said.
That's correct.
So I want to make sure I understand what happened on that day.
Okay.
You go to Mark Jensen's office.
Mhm.
He's not there.
That's correct.
And he's not someone you've known for a long time at that point.
That's correct.
It's when you worked at Prudential.
That's correct.
And he's not there. So instead of walking out of the office, you go inside the office
That's correct.
and you look around.
No.
You don't look around. You don't see a notebook.
And I knew you would ask me why I was there.
So my question is did you see a notebook?
I saw a notebook.
And after you saw that notebook, you opened that notebook.
That's correct.
And your testimony today is in a coworker's office that wasn't present, you started to flip through his notebook.
That's correct.
You never told Detective Ratsberger that.
I believe I did.
You believe you told Detective Ratsberg that you saw this notebook?
Absolutely.
Sir, I'm going to show you Exhibit 16, which we agreed is your statement. Can you please take the time to review this and stop when you get to the part that you found a notebook of penis sketches?
I do believe I reviewed this, a copy of it that was texted to me, and you're right, it isn't in there, but I know that I told him
Objection, Your Honor. The counsel is interrupting the witness while he's answering. She's got to wait for him to finish answering the question before she starts speaking.
Give him a chance to finish. I understand. Give him a chance to finish.
And sir, you also had a chance, I think you testified to, that to review the transcripts of your testimony from the last trials.
I did.
You didn't testify to this notebook of penis sketches then either, did you?
I don't think so.
I want to ask you a few questions about this Barry Peterson spoofing email that you testified about.
Okay.
You testified that Mr. Jensen advised you that he created an email to spoof a coworker.
That's accurate.
And was this when you guys were at Stifel Nicholas
Yes.
in 1998?
This was more like 2001, 2002.
So at that point, who was the manager of the Stifel Nicholas office?
Mark was.
Mr. Jensen was the manager.
Mr. Jensen was.
And after Mr. Jensen told you that he spoofed an employee, you went to St. Louis? Did you tell them about what the manager of the office was doing to an employee?
Objection, there's two questions and she didn't allow him to answer the first question
I
before.
think
she
it's time for our morning break. That's what I think. So we'll continue, folks. Go in the back, relax. All right, let's try to take 10 minutes if we can. Thank you. All right, have a seat, folks. We're back on the record on Mr. Jensen's case. The appearances are the same. Mr. Naring is still under oath, and we will continue with the cross-examination. With that, Attorney Krause, you could start.
Thank you. Mr. Naring, I asked a really bad question when we ended there, so I'm going to rephrase it.
Okay.
In 1998, Mark Jensen was the manager of Stifel Nicholas.
Yes, he was.
And you had testified on direct about some spoofing of Barry Peterson.
Yes.
So he would be considered an employee of Mark Jensen, or
Pardon me?
someone he supervised.
Yes, he was the manager at the time.
So he supervised Barry Peterson.
That's correct.
He supervised you.
That's correct.
And at any point when Mark Jensen told you about the spoofing, did you contact St. Louis and advise them about what this manager was doing to someone he supervised?
No, I did not.
And when you talked to Detective Ratzberg, your testimony is you told him about the spoofing?
I know that I did.
And you never testified about any of this in your previous trial testimony.
I cannot remember, but if I didn't, I didn't.
You had a chance to review your previous testimony transcripts.
It was over 100 pages. If I didn't, I didn't.
Another conversation you talked to this jury about was a conversation that Mark Jensen had with you about, it sounded like divorce, right?
Okay,
It was after you learned about the affair with Kelly Labonte,
that's correct.
and you told him about possible ramifications.
We discussed them.
And what you told the jury today was that the possible ramifications you talked about was child custody and splitting assets.
Correct.
Now, you also testified again, January of 2008, and you were asked the question.
Counsel, what transcript?
Thank you.
Page number
It's page 15.
of the, of
I believe it's the first day. Let me just double check.
9? Do you know which
So it's
date? Because there were
The
two-
10th.
The 10th.
Mhm.
Okay. On what page are you on?
Well, I was on a page. Now I got to find it. What did I say? 15? Page 15. The fourth line.
Page 15, line 4?
And what exactly, and the question was, and what exactly did you tell him about the ramifications? And your answer was, we talked about custody of the kids, possibilities of one spouse moving away, and things like that. Next question. Did you tell him that it was a difficult position to be in terms of divorce? Yes. And I'm going to go down to the next question. Did you ever talk to him, or did he ever talk to you about the financial ramifications, like splitting money and the assets, splitting the assets? And your answer was no. I don't believe that was an issue for him. That was your testimony in 2008.
We discussed this topic on many occasions.
I
And-
understand that, sir. My question was, that was your testimony in 2008.
Okay,
No, you testified that you knew Mark and Julie Jensen
yes, I
as
did.
friends.
Yes.
You knew Julie Jensen was from the Kenosha area?
I'm not sure I knew that.
Didn't know that she had lived there her entire life,
That's correct.
or that her brother lived just a few miles away?
I knew family was in the area, but I didn't know she was born and raised there.
Another conversation you talked about and talked to this jury about was a conversation you had with Mark Jensen about Kelly Labonte after Miss Jensen's death. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that.
Okay,
Your testimony was that Mark Jensen asked 1 or 2 weeks after Julie Jensen passed if Kelly Labonte should move into the family home.
That's correct.
And you told him that wouldn't be a good idea.
Yes, I did.
You never told Detective Ratsberg about this conversation about Kelly Labonte.
I cannot remember.
In fact, he specifically asked you about Kelly Labonte and Mark Jensen's relationship with her. And in fact, when she moved to Kenosha, but at no point did you tell him that Mark Jensen asked if Kelly Labonte should move into the house 1 to 2 weeks after Julie Jensen's death.
Okay.
Did you tell him that?
Gosh, there are so many facets to this case. I don't think I touched on absolutely everything every time I sat down to speak with him.
And you didn't testify to that last time in January of 2008,
Testified to what?
the 2 weeks after Julie Jensen's death
Oh,
conversation.
it was shortly after the death. That's correct.
But you didn't testify to it previously.
I can't remember what I testified to.
You read the transcript, sir.
It was over 100. It was over 100 pages. Yeah, I read it all, but just in one ear and out the other. There's so much.
You were aware that in January of 1999, Kelly Labonte was still married and living outside the state of Wisconsin.
I was.
So I want to go back to this friendship you had with the Jensens. I think you said it developed in 1990, 1991,
That's correct.
and you would do things as a family
That's correct.
with the Jensens family,
Yes.
cross-country skiing,
Yes.
camping,
Not camping, but bicycle trips. And
like glamping. Was that like Door County, or was that more
we'd stay in
hotel?
hotels.
And when you stayed in these hotels, did you find babysitters for your children so you could go to strip clubs?
No, we did not.
That wasn't something your families did.
No.
And in 1990, when do you think the last trip you took to Door County was?
Sorry, I cannot help you with that. I don't know.
It wasn't until maybe July, August of 1998 that you stopped having these family trips together.
That's correct.
And that's because you found out about Mark's affair with Kelly Labonte.
Yes,
And you didn't want to do things as a family.
that's correct.
And so between the time that you stopped doing anything with the Jensens and Miss Jensen's funeral, the only time you had any conversation with Miss Jensen was sometime in October of 1998. I think you took a bike trip with your wife.
I do remember reading that. Oh, but that's correct. I didn't see much of her.
You might have remembered reading it. I'm asking if you actually remember it, though.
I remember it when I read it, but you know what? Prior to reading it, that was
didn't
not a
remember.
part of my memory.
So sometime in October of 1998, you and your wife were on bikes
That's correct.
and you stopped by the Jensen home
Yes,
and you saw Julie Jensen
that's correct.
and you saw Mark Jensen.
That's correct.
And after that time, you didn't have any other conversation with Julie Jensen.
That's correct.
You didn't see Julie Jensen again
I did
after
not.
that. You didn't call her on the phone and say, hey, I hear you're a little down.
I did not. I never talked to her by myself.
You did know, because Mr. Jensen shared it with you, that Julie Jensen had this affair
Yes,
sometime in 1990, 1991.
that's correct.
And that she had filed for divorce.
Yes,
And at that time, David Jensen was a small child.
yes.
During the course of this friendship with Mr. Jensen, he did talk to you about concerns about the harassment of his wife and himself.
I couldn't hear all of that.
During the years that you were friends and co-workers with Mr. Jensen, he did talk to you about the harassment of himself and Julie Jensen.
Yes, he did.
He did talk to you about phone calls made to the Jensen home.
That's correct.
He also talked to you about photographs left at the Jensen home.
And on his work vehicles, that's correct.
So he told you about the photograph on his work vehicle.
That's correct.
And you said that this was a small office.
The Prudential Beige office was huge, and I believe there were pictures left. We had 80 brokers. There were pictures left at that time, I believe. But the Baird office obviously was small, and I didn't work there. The Stiefel office was very small, and I did work there.
So the Baird office that he was at, you were not at.
That's correct.
So, sorry. Although he had told you about it, you weren't there when he found them.
That's right.
Mr. Neering, you've been a stockbroker for a long time before you retired.
Yes.
It'd be fair to say that companies have specific symbols that they use, like McDonald's is MCD
Yes.
and Citicorp is CCI.
I think it's just C, or it was 9 years ago.
It might have changed now.
You never know.
HD is Home Depot.
Correct.
WMT is Walmart.
Yes.
DE is Deere and Company.
Nothing runs like a deer.
Right. That's what my stepdad says. PDE is Pride Petroleum.
Yes.
And those are symbols that stockbrokers use when talking about companies.
Yeah, the prices show up on the tape that you see, the scroll. And when we want to look up information on our work computers, we use those symbols.
So if I put in Google, let's say GLM, it's going to come up with Global Marine.
Maybe not Google per se, but if it's a financial site, it would.
It might show me that there is something associated with that. I'd have to click on it to get what it was associated with.
Yep.
And those are BBY is Best Buy.
Correct.
And those are pretty common symbols that stockbrokers know.
Yes.
Is there a security industry association for stockbrokers?
Yes.
And they sometimes have dinners or meetings?
I don't know what organization you're talking about in particular, but our company had dinners. I don't know if that's what you're referring to.
I did not know that, but your company
Well,
had
like the blueprint you referenced.
so that would be some type of a meeting that would be had.
That's correct.
You testified on, when I was asking you some questions about schedules, that Mr. Jensen was kind of a later morning, later at night kind of worker. You were an early morning, leave at a normal time worker.
That's correct.
And that was pretty consistent over the years.
Yes.
It'd be fair to say you weren't checking him in and checking him out.
We all worked whenever we wanted to. That's correct.
If he was going to be late, he might call or he might not.
He would not call.
He would not call. You testified on direct that Mr. Jensen did not come into the office on December 2nd. Is it that you just didn't see him? I just want to clarify. You didn't see him or he didn't come in? Sorry, December 3rd is what I meant. Thank
You
you.
had me confused there.
I was
That's
confused
correct.
too, sir.
That I didn't see him or he didn't come in. Are you asking if there's a difference there?
Yes.
I don't think he ever came in where I didn't see him. So yeah, maybe he came in and I didn't see him, but his office is right by mine, and that wasn't the type of relationship we had in the office.
So it's possible he would have come in and you wouldn't have seen him. You might have been in a meeting.
It's not possible. Yeah, I mean, it's possible.
You might have been on the phone.
Okay.
I'm just asking, sir. Is it possible that you could have been on the phone at some point during the day?
And
not-
therefore, I wouldn't have known that he arrived.
Correct.
That's not possible.
You did talk to Detective Ratzberger about whether Mr. Jensen came in on December 3rd.
Okay.
Do you remember that?
We talked about so many things. No, I don't remember speaking with him specifically about it.
Do you remember telling him that Mr. Jensen did call you and talk to you about whether he would be in?
On December 3rd?
Yes.
I do not recall that.
Do you remember telling him that Mark Jensen told you he would be in late or not at all?
I do not recall telling him that.
It'd also be fair to say that some stockbroker business happens outside of the office.
Yes, we see people outside of the office. That's correct.
You meet clients.
Right.
Go out for lunch.
Right.
Go out for dinners.
Yes,
Business is done at those points.
yes.
You said you spoke to Mr. Jensen on December 4th,
The day after, that's correct.
and that's when he called to tell you that his wife had passed away.
That's correct.
And he told you he thought it was a drug interaction.
As I sit here, I don't remember what he told me, but he did tell me that she had passed, and I was blown away.
He told you that she had recently seen a doctor for depression
Yes,
and been prescribed medication.
yes,
You were asked a couple questions about Ed Klug, another stockbroker at Stifel Nicholas.
okay.
You weren't friends with Mr. Klug at the time that you were working at Stifel Nicholas.
Was I friends
In
with him?
1998. I should be more clear about the timing, sir.
No, I don't think I knew him before they opened the Appleton office.
And at some point, Mr. Jensen was charged with the crime in this case,
With what?
with first-degree intentional homicide. You know he was arrested and charged.
That's correct.
And at some point, you actually went and searched for Mr. Klug at a conference.
That's correct. Oh, correct.
And you were searching for Mr. Klug because you had heard rumors about what he had said. Mark Jensen told him.
That's correct.
And this was a conference that you both had attended.
Yes.
And that was in 2006.
Yes.
And he told you that at this Blueprint conference, they had both been drinking.
Yes.
And that's when they had this conversation that Mr. Klug says Mr. Jensen admitted that said something about killing his wife.
That's correct.
Do you remember testifying in 2007 that the conversation between Ed Klug and Mark Jensen, Ed Klug said it happened when opening the Appleton office?
Yeah. When I read the transcript review and I read that, I said I thought Ed Klug had told Mark in Appleton. That wasn't the way I remember it today. I remember Ed telling me that Mark told him that in St. Louis. So there's a discrepancy there. But
So in 2006, you spoke to Mr. Klug, right?
Yes,
At this conference
yes,
about this conversation between him and Mr. Jensen.
that's correct.
And a year later, you testified at a hearing.
Yes,
And during that testimony, you said that the conversation happened when they were both in Appleton.
that's correct.
During the conversation, he also told you that other people were present when Ed Klug and Mark Jensen were speaking.
Excuse me, counsel, what page? Transcript here?
I'm cross-examining. I'm not on a transcript.
Well, you can't have a personal conversation between the lawyers here. I do have some job here.
I'm not quoting from a transcript, Judge.
All right, ask a question.
Once again, please.
Oh, yes. I have to remember what the question was. During the conversation that Ed Klug had with Mark Jensen that he then told you about, Ed Klug said there were other people present.
Okay, that's correct.
Now, 2006 wasn't the only time you talked to Ed Klug about this case.
Yeah, when I read the transcript, I couldn't believe how many times I saw Ed Klug.
You actually talked to him a lot after
It
2006.
appears that way, and I don't remember those conversations, but it appears that I did,
You talked to him after you testified in 2007.
most likely. In fact, until I read the transcripts, and I'd completely forgotten about the airplane trip from Boston with Ed Klug completely. That was just gone from my mind. So, yeah, I talked to Ed a number of times.
And you talked to him after his testimony in 2007.
Probably, yes.
Just a few more questions, sir. I want to talk to you a little bit about the conversations you had with Mark Jensen in November of 1998, if you remember them. Okay?
Okay.
As a result of the conversation you had with Mr. Jensen, you asked your wife to go out to dinner with you or lunch with Julie Jensen,
That's correct.
and she did that.
Yes, she did.
The conversation you had with Mr. Jensen is that Julie Jensen was crying regularly
Yes.
and that she was withdrawn,
That she was withdrawn. Yes,
and he was concerned about that.
that's correct.
That she was locking herself in her room,
Yes.
that she was losing weight,
Yes.
and that she was miserable.
Yes.
He told you he wanted her to see a doctor,
Yes, he did.
and she did not want to see a doctor.
That's correct.
He told you he was encouraging her to go to the doctor.
I think I testified last time that he said the only way he could get her to a doctor, and these are his words, was that if he duct taped her up and threw her in the car. So yeah, he wanted her to go. He said he wanted her to go.
And she didn't want to go.
Objection calls for speculation as to what she did or did not want to do.
Sustained.
Judge, it was only based upon his answer.
Said move on.
He told you that Julie was afraid of ending up like her mother.
Yes.
And you knew her mother had some medical issues.
Yeah, I believe it was alcoholism.
And Julie feared being hospitalized
I
like
don't know
her
if she
mother.
did, but that's what Mark said.
That's what Mark told you.
That's correct.
And that was in November of 1998.
Sounds right.
He also talked to you about her previous treatment for depression.
Perhaps.
You don't specifically remember.
I don't.
So you talked a little bit about this computer that Mr. Jensen said he tried to fry with a large magnet.
Yes.
You know that you can't fry a computer with a large magnet, correct?
I didn't say it. He said it. I don't know if you can or you can't. I've never tried it.
Okay. You also testified that Mr. Jensen was kind of the person you went to if you had issues with the computer software.
Yeah, not so much issues, but just in helping to use the various features.
And that was the software that was on the computer for your work.
No, it was a software that was on his personal computer.
Okay. Did
It
you
was
use
work oriented.
it was work oriented.
Yes.
And did you use that software?
Yeah, I had a laptop and used it as well.
It wasn't about like if your computer died, he would come in and
No,
fix
no,
it.
no. It was just about utilizing the software.
He wasn't the IT tech of Stifel Nicholas.
No, he was not.
Nothing further. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Redirect, Mr. Jambois.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, on cross, defense counsel is asking you about Mark's conversations with you about Julie, suggesting that he was actually communicating real observations about Julie. But really, at the end of the day, was it your impression after Julie's death that he was conveying this information to tell you about Julie, or was he conveying this information to you for some other reason?
Objection, relevance. And
Overruled.
speculation.
Go ahead, answer the question.
Go ahead. Yeah, I was always doubtful of the things he was saying.
And what was it? What was you? Do you have a suspicion or an inference that you drew as to why he was telling you these things?
Objection, speculation.
Overruled. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Once more on the question.
So, did you draw an inference or develop a suspicion as to why Mark Jensen was telling you these things? What his motive was?
Well, I knew what was going on in the background, and it felt very strongly like he was trying to lay a path or an alibi in my lap. So yeah, I never really bought into all of the things he was saying.
And And you even had your wife check on Julie to see if there was truth to what he was telling you.
I did. That's part of the reason. That's correct.
Now, defense counsel had asked you some questions about your previous testimony, and I'm going to go into that. First of all, you were sent the transcripts of your testimony from your testimony on August 29th, 2007. You were sent that testimony,
I believe so.
and it was 87 pages long. Does that sound about right? 88 pages.
Yeah,
long?
there was an 88-page one.
Yeah. And then the first day of your testimony on January 9th, 2008 at the later hearing, and that was from pages 252 to about 270.
Please speak into the mic. With this
I'm
plastic,
sorry.
it's hard to hear you.
I'm sorry. So then the first day of your testimony at the later hearing, it was from pages 252 to page 270. Is that sound about right?
Yes.
And then from the next day of your testimony, it was from page 1 through page 126. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
So you didn't commit to memory all of your testimony from all of those proceedings, did you?
I couldn't. And in fairness, even as I read it and tried to refresh my memory, there were just so many dates and so many things. I couldn't refresh my memory on everything. It's just so much, and it was so long ago.
But one thing that's similar to all those proceedings in this proceeding is you're not just sitting up here and just telling the jury whatever comes to mind. You're actually asked questions by lawyers, correct?
Yes.
And if the lawyer doesn't ask you the question, then you won't provide that answer, correct?
I don't think they'd let me, but that's correct.
Now, defense counsel had asked you about questions, page 117. So, counsel, I'm directing the court and counsel's attention. This is the transcript of day 6 of that previous hearing. And I'm going to go to page 117. And defense counsel had posed you some questions, and they were found, directing court and counsel's attention to, well, these lines aren't marked, but it's about the middle of the page. Question: do you recall being asked the following questions and providing the following answers? Question: and Mr. Albee asked you questions about audits that the home office could do and about system checks that the home office could do on your computers, correct? Answer: yes. Do you recall being provided that question and giving that answer, or now would you concede that was a question and answer that was posed?
You got to run that by me again, please.
Okay, that was the question and that was the answer that was provided to you at the time?
Yes.
And then the next question, did that ever happen to your knowledge in your office? Answer: you mean a system check on computers? Question: Answer: a system check by the home office? Question: yes. Answer: they routinely monitor various things. Do you recall being posed those questions and giving those answers? Or do you at least concede that those questions were posed and those answers provided?
Yes.
Now, and those questions were just posed to you by defense counsel on your cross-examination. So now, to put that in context, do you recall then being asked the next question? And this is the bottom page 117. As of this conversation that you had with Mr. Jensen, where suddenly the next Monday his computer was fried, at that point, were you aware of any system checks where internet history would be checked? Answer: no, not specifically. Do you recall being posed that question and giving that answer, or concede that that question was posed and that was the answer that you gave?
I concede.
On cross, defense counsel had asked about whether or not you'd ever told anybody about the conversation where Mark Jensen was asking you about the suitability of Ms. Labonte coming to stay at the house. Do you recall her asking those questions?
I do.
And so directing your attention now to page 93 of your testimony on January 10th, 2008. Do you recall being asked the following question and giving the following answer? Page 93.
Closer to the mic, please, Bob.
Page 93. Do you recall being asked the following question? It might be page 94. Let's see what page. Yeah, it is page 93. Do you recall being asked the following question and providing the following answer? Question. Do you recall him discussing the suitability of Ms. Labonte coming to stay at his house? Answer. That's correct. Question. This is the same house he shared with Mrs. Jensen? Answer. Yes. Question. And what did he ask about? Answer. He asked if I thought it would seem out of place if he presented her to the family as a friend or an acquaintance from the home office in St. Louis. Question. And what did you tell him? Answer. I thought it would be out of place. Now, do you recall being posed those questions, or do you acknowledge that being posed those questions and providing those answers on January 10th, 2008 at the earlier hearing?
Yes. Or I concede that I probably did.
Thank you, Mr. Nearing. I don't
Recross on those limited questions.
Briefly.
All right.
You were just asked that last question about Miss Labonte staying. That was in relation to the wake, correct?
In relation to what?
The wake. About him introducing her as a colleague from Stifel Nicholas.
No,
and
I
coming
think he
to the
said
wake.
moving into the home as well. And I put
So-
the two conversations together.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you there, sir.
Go ahead with the question.
You were asked a question, same place, just slightly before what Attorney Jamboyce read. Do you recall a conversation you had with Mr. Jensen regarding the suitability of Miss Labonte coming to Miss Jensen's wake? Your answer was yes.
I do.
And it was shortly after that that you were asked the question, do you recall him discussing the suitability of Miss Labonte coming to stay at his house? That's correct.
Yes.
And then 2 questions later, and what did he ask about that? Answer, he asked if I thought it would seem out of place if he presented her to the family as a friend or an acquaintance from the home office in St. Louis. That was your answer.
Okay. Yes,
And that was in relation to the wake.
that's correct.
Nothing further. Thank you, sir.
All right, you're excused. Thank you.
Yes, I did not have any redirect, Your Honor.
You can go. You got to talk to them, okay? The prosecutor? Yeah.
The state will call Sharon Nearing to the stand.
What number is that?
Number 53, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Judge, I'd move Exhibit 16 in. Judge, I'd move Exhibit 16 into the record.
16's moved in. They have a flag over there. I'm all the way up front here, remain still. It's the way it is. If you raise your right hand, I solemnly swear the testimony is meant to be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. Have a seat, get as close as you can to the little microphones. Spell your first and last name for the reporter.
Sharon Nearing,
Spell your first and last name for the reporter.
SHARONNEHRING.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Jamboy.
And Ms. Nearing, you're married to David Nearing?
Yes,
And how long have you and he been married?
46 years.
Do you recall a time where your husband and you became friends with the Mark Jensen and his family?
Yes,
And when would that have been, if you can recall?
I would say, do you have a date for Douglas's birth?
I do not.
Oh, okay. He was probably 1 or 2 years old because the things that we did outside of that, he had been sitting up. So, I mean, I can give you a better time frame if you can tell me when he was born, because that's kind of where my recollections are. He was at least that old.
Do you recall providing a statement, a signed statement, on August 28th, 2002 to Detective Ratsburg?
Yes,
And if at that time you said myself and my husband, David Nearing, became friends with the Jensens in about 90 or 91, does that refresh your recollection as to how long and when you and your husband became friends with the Jensens?
it refreshes my recollection as I was thinking about it. Again, it's been a long time. My recollections of knowing them, again, it's old, but I believe we knew them more when, like I said, Douglas was of an age that he could sit up, so that would be the time frame that I could work from. I'm guessing more closer to, we might have started doing things mid-90s rather than right when they met, when they first started working together.
So you and Mr. Nearing had children,
One, yes,
and the Jensens had 2 children?
correct.
And it was about that time when Douglas was old enough to sit up on his own that you and your family started doing things together?
Correct.
What sort of things did your families do together, if you can recall?
We had been to their house for dinner. They had been to our house. We went biking up in Door County, and we went cross-country skiing in Door County.
So it sounded like a pretty active family type activities that you did together.
Yeah, always family, yes.
And did you have an opportunity to see how Julie was as a mother and how she was as a person?
Yes.
So what was your impression of Julie as a mother and as a person as you got to know her and Mark Jensen?
My impression was that she was enjoying and loving being a mother.
Now, do you recall in October of 1998, you and your husband riding your bicycles from Racine to Pleasant Prairie to see the Jensens?
Again, very long time ago, but vaguely.
Did you place the date of that in your calendar?
Possibly, but I don't have that date available.
At the time that you gave this statement to Detective Ratsburg on August 28, 2002, were these matters fresher in your mind?
I would assume so.
So if you in your statement indicates on October 10th, 1998, myself and my husband biked down to see the Jensens in Pleasant Prairie. We didn't call them ahead of time to see who was home. I remember that date because I wrote it down in my calendar, which I still have.
Judge, I object. I
Does
don't think
that-
this is refreshing.
Does that refresh your
The
recollection?
witness to look at the statement?
Yes, I would, Judge.
Do we
Well-
have the statement, Mr. Jamboy?
I've got it here on my computer. I didn't print it out. That's why I was doing it this way. Let's put it this way. Instead of
I think
using it.
the defense counsel's giving you a copy of the
Oh,
statement.
thank you.
Thank you.
I will, this has been marked as an exhibit, but I will show you this document. Ask you to read it yourself. Don't read it out loud, just read it yourself.
Okay, if I gave you that date, I do keep calendars and I do write, like, I don't want to call them logs, but I write notes of what we do and I've done that forever. So if that's the date I gave you, I'm fairly sure that it was correct.
So we'll then treat this as a recorded recollection rather than as a refreshed recollection. So your recorded recollection was that on October 10th, 1998, myself and my husband biked down to see the Jensens in Pleasant Prairie. We didn't call him ahead of time to see he was home. I remember that date because I wrote it down on my calendar, which I still have.
Judge,
So that was your recollection at the time?
Correct.
Judge, I would object as to leading. I think if Attorney Jamboys is going to ask her questions and she doesn't remember, she can refresh her recollection with the document that's been provided. She doesn't actually have her notes from back then, which would make it a past recollection recorded.
Well, actually, this is a statement that she
Ask the-
wrote.
Just ask a question, Mr. Jam.
Okay. Now, thinking back to that time that you rode to Pleasant Prairie and you visited with Mark and Julie Jensen, do you recall seeing anything unusual about Julie Jensen at that time? Did she appear to be normal Julie Jensen that you'd known for a number of years?
Again, recollections are a little old, but I just do remember riding down. I think they were working out in the yard. We said hello, probably turned around and went back because it was a fairly long ride.
Okay. Now, you remember sometime in the month of November 1998, your husband, David Nearing, conveying to you information that he'd received from Mark Jensen concerning Julie Jensen's condition?
Yes,
And what had your husband told you about Julie's condition, that Mark had told him about Julie's condition?
that she was feeling poorly, that she didn't want to get out of bed, and that she was feeling sick.
And did your husband suggest that you do anything in response to receiving this information?
Yes, he suggested maybe I call and see how she was doing. And I guess we both kind of came to the conclusion that if she was doing fine, I would ask her out to lunch.
So did you call Julie Jensen?
Yes,
And did you end up asking her to go out to lunch?
yes.
And do you remember where you went for lunch?
I didn't until I reread the testimony, but Culver's, I know we did fast food, but it was Culver's in Kenosha.
And so when you went to visit with Julie or meet Julie at the Culver's in Kenosha, did she come alone or did she bring somebody with her?
She brought Douglas with her.
And did you have your son with you or not?
No, he was old enough to be in school.
So when you had this lunch with Julie, do you recall whether you were looking for the signs that Mark Jensen had conveyed to your husband about Julie being depressed and lost weight and gaunt and depressed and things like that?
I wasn't doing an examination, but I was there to just talk to her and see how she was.
And to assess her condition in comparison or contrast to the way it had been described to your husband by Mark Jensen. Would that be fair?
That would be fair.
And did you assess Julie's condition in comparison or contrast to the manner in which her condition had been described to your husband by Mark Jensen?
She drove herself there. She brought Douglas in. We sat down. We had a conversation. We had a meal. I did not see that she looked sick. I'm not a doctor. I understand that. But she looked fine to me. In my estimation. I'm not, again, I can't make a judgment call because I'm not a doctor.
You didn't see any evidence of her being depressed or suicidal?
No.
Objection.
But again, I can't make that. I'm not a doctor. So
The objection was overruled. Continue, Mr. Jam.
she appeared as the same Julie that I have seen before.
Did she say anything to you about her marriage and the state of her marriage?
I'm going to basically fall back on reading my testimony because, again, I don't have a lot of, it's been a long time. I do believe she had mentioned, and I don't remember the word, but that she was not happy. She didn't know how things were going. Let's put it that way.
She wasn't happy about her marriage.
I would want to say just more unhappy at the moment. I don't, again, I would have to reread my testimony, but I would just say not
I would
not
direct
in the best of moods about how things were with her at the moment.
first of all, I'm going to move that statement into evidence as an exhibit. So what exhibit?
Is it marked? All right, let's have it marked with the clerk.
What number is it? What number is it? 23.
So I should have in this document marked as exhibit 23. I would direct your attention to the last sentence. Just read that to yourself first.
The last sentence?
The last sentence on that exhibit. Actually, the last two sentences.
Okay, based on what I said back then, I would assume that's what I said. Again, it's been 20 some years. So if she mentioned it as being unhappy, then I would assume that's what she said.
So the recorded recollection at that time was, quote, Julie did mention that her marriage wasn't going well and that she wasn't sure what to do next. She didn't know what to do about Mark or her marriage. That was your statement on August 28, 2002, correct?
Correct.
And on August 28, 2002, you had a clear recollection of that communication or the conversation you had with Julie. Is that true?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Nearing. I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Cross.
Ms. Nearing, you said that you became friends with the Jensens because your husband worked with Mark.
Correct.
And although they met each other in 90 or 91, you specifically remember that you became closer after Douglas was born.
I've been trying to think this whole thing through. And again, it's been a long time. I don't have recollections. We may have done things socially with them earlier in the 90s, but my clear recollections are when we went biking and we went cross-country skiing, Douglas was old enough to sit up. So I'm, again, depending on when Douglas was born, I'm guessing that's when we maybe did more things more socially.
So your memory is that you did things more socially after Douglas was born, although you may have done things previous to that.
Again, I do not remember. I've been trying to rack my brain to remember if I remember seeing him as a baby, and I'm sorry, it's just not there.
And when you did things as a family, it was like activities or dinner in the home.
Correct.
And by activities, I mean the cross-country skiing in Door County,
Correct.
biking.
Correct.
Did you guys do hiking also?
Those are really the only two instances I clearly remember that I have some memories of are the biking and the cross-country skiing.
And when you guys went to Door County, you would stay in hotels?
Correct.
Do you remember ever getting babysitters for the children and going to strip clubs?
No.
No, you would see Julie when you did these things as a family. Would you consider her a close friend?
I guess to me, close is someone you call up if you're down or they're down or whatever. And so I would say maybe not. I would say a social friend that I felt comfortable with, that I knew their children, but maybe not. I wouldn't consider it close.
So you guys would see each other occasionally when you guys were meeting with your families?
Correct.
Or they were coming to your house for dinner or you were going to their house
Correct.
for dinner? Julie didn't talk to you about the affair she had in 1991.
I did not know about that. No.
She didn't talk to you about her mother's alcoholism or any depression in her family.
The mother's problems, I don't know where I would have found that out because of everything that's happened over the last time. I don't know where I would have known that from.
So you do know it, you're just not sure where you got it
Correct. I
from.
don't know if it would have been from Julie. I don't remember if it would have been from Julie or not.
You've spoken to other people about this case, including your husband.
Well, yeah, we were on trial last time.
And you've spoken about like what you remembered and what others have told you to each other.
Correct.
So it's possible you got that from him.
It's possible. It's possible she told me. I don't have a recollection.
That's fair. Now, you said that you observed the family interact when you guys were together hiking and biking.
Hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
And you also observed the family.
Nod my head. Is that what you're telling me? Okay. Sorry.
That is what I'm saying. You also saw the family interact in October of 1998,
Yes.
briefly,
Very briefly.
on this bike ride.
Hmm.
Yes.
Yes. Sorry.
And is that because did you bike down from Milwaukee?
No, we live in Racine, so we would have biked from Racine.
So you biked from Racine, kind of stopped at the Jensen home. I
Mhm.
think you testified you saw them outside.
If my recollection is correct, they were working in the yard.
And you didn't see any issues between the two of them.
No.
Prior to October of 1998, when was the time before that you had socialized with the Jensens?
I don't know.
Is there a time that you stopped socializing with the Jensens because of your husband's comments to you about Mark Jensen having an affair?
Yes.
And that was sometime in the summer of 1998, if you remember.
No memory.
And during the bike ride, you stayed for a short period of time.
Correct.
You didn't observe anything unusual?
Nothing unusual.
Julie Jensen didn't express any fears or concerns to you?
No.
So I want to go to this Culver's lunch that you and Julie Jensen had.
Okay.
Was that in Kenosha?
Yes.
And so you drove to Kenosha to meet her for lunch.
Yes.
And she had Douglas at the time.
Yes.
And do you remember how old he was? 2 to 3 years old?
That would be my estimation.
And just like most 3-year-olds, Julie was kind of doting on him,
Yes.
making sure that he was eating,
Yes.
making sure that he was staying in his seat,
Trying.
making sure he wasn't running around Culver's restaurant.
Correct.
And during this time, you had an opportunity to talk to her.
Yes.
Did you ask her if she was depressed?
No.
Did you ask her if she had been locking herself in her room?
No.
Did you ask her if she had been refusing to come to eat?
No. Can I add? If anything, I would have just asked how she was.
And when you asked how she was, she told you she was unhappy.
Correct.
And during that time, she never expressed any fear of Mr. Jensen.
I can't say.
And you can't say because your memory is not clear about everything that's happened over the last 24 years.
Correct.
In 2002, you talked to Detective Bratsburg,
Correct.
and he wanted to know everything that you knew about Julie Jensen and Mark Jensen.
Correct.
He knew that you had had lunch with Julie Jensen at Culver's
Yes.
because your husband had told him.
Yes.
So he wanted to know about that interaction.
Yes.
And he asked you questions about it.
Yes.
He asked you what you observed.
I'm guessing.
He asked you what Julie Jensen said to you.
I would assume.
And then after that, a statement was written.
Okay.
And you had a chance to review that statement, Exhibit 23. Yes?
Yes.
Did you write that or did Detective Ratsburg write it?
I do not know.
It starts off with myself and my husband. Does that refresh your memory as to whether you wrote it or he wrote it?
I do not know.
So it's possible you wrote it, or it's possible the Detective Ratsburg wrote it and then you reviewed it.
I do not know.
What don't you know?
I don't know if I wrote it or he wrote it.
Okay. But no matter who wrote it, after it was written, you reviewed it
Correct.
and you signed it.
Correct.
And in fact, when you signed it, it says, I have read the above statement and found it to be true and correct.
Yes.
And there's nothing in this statement about Julie Jensen expressing any fear of her husband.
No.
I have nothing further. Thank you, ma'am.
You have
Exhibit 23 has been received into evidence, is that correct? Exhibit 23 has been received into evidence, is that correct, Your Honor?
Yes,
Okay.
23 is received.
Judge, I think my concern is that we asked very specific questions about Exhibit 23, but I'm not sure we asked every single thing that was in there.
Well, I've only got one question.
He's got one question. We're going to hold him to it.
So looking at the exhibit, it's clear that this statement was not written by anybody, it was typed, correct?
When I've seen it, yes.
And it's on a form, statement, and then name, Sharon K. Nearing, so forth, correct?
Correct.
So unless that at the time you obtained this, or at the time Paul Ratsburg obtained this statement from you, were you sitting at a typewriter or a computer, or was Mr. Ratsburg, or do you remember anybody sitting at a computer?
No memory. I remember talking to him. I don't remember the particulars of what was happening.
But it was a typewritten statement, correct?
Correct.
Nothing further.
Nothing.
Thank you. You were excused. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, folks, perfect timing. We can take our lunch break. Please be back at 1:15. Please don't talk about the case. Holding the jury, let's go to lunch. You can take the defendant back.